Hi everyone. So now that we have looked at the analysis of databases, it's really important to then start to move on to the design stage. Now what I've done here is on the left hand side, I've listed all of the information that we pulled out of the travel agency functional requirements about the 4 different entities and the attributes that they were going to include. Obviously there was more information as part of the functional requirements and the end user requirements came with that as well, but these are the bits that we need in order to build our first part of design. Now our first part of design is called an entity relationship diagram. Now you'll have come across these already at National 5. Just at higher, the only real difference is that your entity relationship diagrams are going to be a lot bigger, because rather than working with just 1 or 2 entities, we're going to be working with 3, 4, maybe even 5 entities, which means that it's going to be a lot more busy and a lot bigger, and we have to really plan about where things are going to lay out so that we can get this spot on. Okay, now the first thing we want to notice about our 4 different entities here, or our 4 different tables, is that they have a list of attributes, but they don't have the primary keys and the foreign keys that were also mentioned in the functional requirements. So we have to have a little think about what primary keys we might put in, and also have a little think about what foreign keys we might need and what tables are going to link together. Okay, it's really important that we think about how these things blend. Okay, so I want to start off with looking at the connection between hotel and resort. Now when we look at hotel, we can see we've got lots of information about each individual building per se. When we look at resort, we can see that we've got less information. Now resort is meant to be like an area, so a coastal area, a spa area, a city area, where hotels are listed within there. Okay, if we were to try and create a link between these 2 tables, does it make sense to put the hotel, let's say primary keys, maybe a hotel reference number, in the resort table, or the resort ID number in the hotel? Okay, the reason that we know that we have to put the information for the resort into the hotel is, if not, the resort would need to have multiple primary keys. Foreign keys, 1 for every single one of hotel that had inside there. Whereas if we have it like hotel, if each hotel only just has the resort that it should be listed in, then that should work correctly. Okay, so what we want to do is make sure that we're adding in a primary key for this hotel and also a foreign key that links to resort. Okay, resort will need a primary key, and if we have a look at the other tables, resort doesn't really need to link to customer or booking because it's linking to hotel. Okay, so let's have a look at the other ones. When we look at customers, customers are definitely going to make a booking. And when they make a booking, they're probably going to book a specific hotel, which is in a resort. So the link needs to go from customer to booking to hotel and then to resort. And once we start to work out how that looks, we can start to build up our entity relationship diagram on the right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to put them round in a circle, just because if we do it all in one straight line, we're probably going to run out of space for our bubbles around the outside. So I'm going to start off with resort. Okay, now the entities are represented by a rectangle. Okay, so you just pop in a rectangle and you pop in their names. So we're starting off with resort. On the right hand side, we're going to have booking. I'm going to make sure there's, hotel. I'm going to make sure there's lots of space around that hotel because there's loads of entities here, attributes, that need to come around that entity. So we need lots of space. Okay, then each hotel is going to be able to be booked. So we're going to put booking down here. And then lastly, we're going to finish up with customer. Now we need to pop our links in, okay? So there should be a link between resort and hotel, a link between hotel and booking, and a link between customer and booking. And before you start thinking about the relationship types, whether it's a one-to-many or a one-to-one relationship, what we need to think about is what we might name these. So a resort perhaps is the different location for the hotels, so we could pop that in. So we'll just put is location of hotels. Okay, we've got hotel perhaps can be booked, so let's put can be down here. Maybe just put can be part of a booking, so it just makes it sound a little bit better English. So hotel can be part of a booking, and then a customer can make or makes a booking. Now, I think that for every year group I've ever taught entity relationship diagrams, the one thing they hate is naming these relationships, okay? Just try to name it as you would read it. And one bit of advice I would give you is if you're going to use something like a plain description, let's say like makes, don't use that more than once, okay? So it can be part of, again, as a wee bit bland, so try not to use that more than once. Just try and be creative so they're not all exactly the same, but they make sense if you read it in a sentence. So a customer makes a booking. Okay, so we've got our links in. There's no link between resort and customer because when a customer makes a booking, they will book a hotel, which is part of the resort, and the link comes from the other three. So you don't need to draw a line up this way. Okay, and the next thing we have to think about is what relationship type these are. So most of the time, and this is not a strict rule, but most of the time, your links will be one-to-many. Okay, just because that's how most relational databases are built up. So a one-to-many relationship, you sometimes get a one-to-one, and if you've designed a proper fully relational database, you shouldn't ever have a many-to-many. That's what you're trying to get rid of, because what we would usually have is a customer can book many hotels, and many hotels can be booked by a customer. And what we've added in here, booking, is like what I call a junction table, which means that stops there being a many-to-many relationship between these two things. We've added in this extra entity called booking, so we can store each booking individually, even if the same customer books the same hotel, maybe on multiple years or something like that. Okay, so when we think about customers and bookings, we have each customer makes many individual bookings. Okay, obviously customers, lots of bookings happen, but for every customer that's stored in this database once, they can make multiple bookings. So to show that, we draw a one-to-many relationship. Now, I prefer to use the crow feet to show the one-to-many relationship. Okay, there are different ways to do it. For example, you could have a line and it says 1 to M, which also represents one-to-many. You could have a line that's got a 1 to an infinity sign, which also represents a one-to-many, or you can have a 1 with the crow's feet. It's entirely up to you how you want to represent that. All three of those things mean the exact same thing. I just prefer to have the 1 to crow's feet. I just think it looks a little bit neater. So again, when we're looking at the next relationship, hotel to booking, okay, then from hotel and to booking, each hotel is booked many times. So the many happens at the bottom. Okay, rather than each booking contains many hotels. That's not true. Each booking should only have one hotel listed, but the hotels can be listed in many different bookings as they're booked by different customers. Okay, and then again, the last one we think about resorts and hotel is each hotel in many resorts, or does each resort have many hotels? Each resort has many hotels, so the many goes at this side. And again, it's how you read it off. Resort is a location of many hotels. Okay, so that is the start of your entity relationship diagram, and sometimes in an exam paper that's actually all you're asked to create because the attributes are just an added extra that can be done quite quickly on the outside. Okay, that's the most difficult part. And I'll give you a little bit of advice here. If rather than given the functional requirements, what you've been given is a set of the 4 entities with their primary keys and their foreign keys listed, the easy way to work this out is this is where your foreign keys are. So we said earlier on that hotel would have the foreign key of resort in it, and it absolutely does. This is how we can kind of see the foreign key being represented visually to understand how that links together. And again, booking would need to have a foreign key from the hotel and needed to have a foreign key from customer, so it has both the many ends of the one-to-many relationships. And I always find that if you're given a table rather than a set of functional requirements, it makes it a lot easier to work that out. Okay, now the last thing we need to do is we need to add on our attributes. So let's just start with resort. We'll work our way around. So resort needs to have these 3 attributes, plus it needs to have a primary key. So let's just make a primary key called resort ID. Okay, so we pop resort ID here. It goes inside a bubble, and then you link it to here. Okay, and then we have resort name. Now, one thing you're going to notice about what I'm writing here is that I'm changing the layout of the words. So on the left hand side in the functional requirements, the words were written with gaps in them. Now, when we are creating our database, when it comes to that stage, we are not going to be able to put gaps in our field names, or it's good practice not to put gaps in your field names, not to have any spaces. So what you want to do is you want to be able to kind of have them using camel case or something, so you have the words all as one rather than two words. Okay, so that's my 4 entities. The next thing you want to think about is which one of them is special, which one's your primary key, and that's this one, and that has to be identified by underlining it, okay, to make it really obvious that that's the primary key within that database, or within that entity within the database. Okay, then we move on to hotel. Now we've got a lot more in hotel. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 attributes. We're also going to need to add in a primary key, which we don't have, so maybe a hotel ID, hotel reference, and then we're also going to need to add in the foreign key for resort to link these two tables together. Now we know what that's called, so I'm going to pop that in first, right? So resort ID. Now the great thing about these, it doesn't actually matter what order you put them in, okay? And some people prefer to do all the writing in the bubbles next. Some people prefer to do the bubbles and then the lines. It really doesn't matter. Okay, let's make up a primary key next. So let's call it hotel reference, just so they're not all IDs. Hotel ref. We've got hotel name. Capital or non-capital there, doesn't really matter. It's up to you. Hotel name. Season. Start. Date, check in time, price per night. Very important to remember to include that because it can be used in your calculations later on. Meal plan, swimming pool. It's good that you can use this extra space inside if you run out as well. And star rating. So once I've drawn them all in, you put your circles in, or ellipses I should say. Doesn't have to be super neat as long as it's legible. And you're following all the rules. And then join them all up to your entity. Super. Okay, and then what we need to do is think about our primary key. So hotel ref was our primary key, so we underline that, and then we need to think about our foreign key. So our link was to resort, we've added resort ID, and we identify a foreign key by popping a wee asterisk or a star, just superscript after the word. Okay, then we go to booking. Thankfully it's a little bit smaller, so let's pop in the 3 we know. Start date. I'm just going to make mine a bit shorter. In party, num of nights, and then we're going to need a booking ID of some kind. Let's call it a booking number, booking no. That's our primary key. And then we're going to need 2 foreign keys to link to hotel and customer. So we already know that we've got hotel reference for this one, so let's put hotel ref. That's a foreign key, so we put a wee star. And then we need one for customer, so let's call it, let's just go for a number again. So customer, no. Okay, and that's a wee star as well. And we just need to make sure we set that up as our primary key across here. So again, put your bubbles round. And link. And then the last one is your customer. So let's pop customer number first so we don't forget that. That's our primary key. Underlined, and then all the rest of them. So we want first name, surname, address, town, postcode. Bubble, 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 bubble. And you'll understand why doing the functional requirements from the information that's been given from your user is so important, because obviously if you didn't have this to work from, this would be a lot more difficult task popping these attributes in, because you wouldn't know the names of these different things and what things you would need without going back and having a little look over what was required by the user in the first place. Okay, so that is your entity relationship diagram. It's not super neat, it's legible, you've got all the information you need, and if I was to ask you to now go and to implement that, you should very easily be able to see there's four entities with all their attributes around the outside, how they link together, what should we set up as primary keys, what should we set up as foreign keys, and the only additional information you need is about each individual attributes, which is what leads us to data dictionaries that we're going to have a little look at next time. Okay, hopefully that all makes sense. Drop me a message if you've got any questions, and I'll pop up your task for this week on Satchel 1. Speak to you later, guys. Bye.